welcome all when you do come on. If you can put yourself on mute, and then you'll be able to unmute when you talk. And also, if we can see your face, we always like to see faces. We understand not everybody wants to be seen, but the standards for being Zoom ready, I think, has changed over the months. Everything is almost Zoom ready. All right. Expected a big crowd this morning, and we're doing good. Thank you, everybody, for getting up this morning, having your coffee, or you can still have your coffee while you join us. That's fine. Good morning to all that have joined us. I think Zoom gets tired at the end of the day, but I think we should be good this morning. People are still coming. We'll wait a couple more minutes to get everybody on. So have more people joining us. If you come on and you're mute, you can unmute yourself later when you're in groups or have something to say. Also, we'd love to see everybody's face, so we don't feel like we're talking to a wall.
I feel like we need music in the background or something. We've got all these creative people. We need something creative going on.
I've been to a few Zoom sessions where the host put some really, like, they put music in the background. So yeah, we should try doing that. It's like elevator. Now this is where people can hear the elevator music.
Well, should we start and then as people join, we'll...
Yeah, why don't you, Shmeza?
Okay, everyone. Hello. Leslie, can you check on the waiting room while I talk?
I'm doing. Yep, I'm watching it.
Awesome. She said Leslie's already got it. Hi, everyone. My name is Shmeza. My pronouns are she and hers, and I am a project coordinator here at CNN. But today I will be your tech. I will be your Zoom tech, so that means you can ask me anything if you're having issues with Zoom. Trying to figure out how to get to something, where your tabs are, I can let you know. I just want to start off with a little kind of Zoom guidelines. We usually stay on mute the whole time unless there's a moment to talk during the time where we talk. I would just recommend that you use your participants wave hand symbol. That will put you right to the top and let me see that I will be able to flag you down. You can also wave your hand, but if there's an opportunity and you're asked to unmute, just please unmute yourself. But we love video. It just kind of gives the element that we could talk to each other and see each other at the same time. Awesome. So there will be a PowerPoint today. There will also be a few breakout rooms and polls. Those will pop up. For the breakout rooms, you will be asked to leave this main room session and come back to it in a later time, but they will be around 5 minutes and it'll give you time to engage with other participants. A few other things you can use, if you go down to the bottom, you can use your participants tabs, your participant, go to your participant tab, you can see everyone's name. If you want, I would ask, and if you want to put your name and your pronouns so that we can identify you if you're talking, or others can see in the breakout rooms, that would be really great. Also, if you go to reactions, we love reactions. You can use that as nonverbal forms of communications. If anything else, just let me know if you have any questions. This is being recorded, so we will be releasing this later and we can give you the materials at the end of the session. Also, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Well, thanks, Shmiza. I'm Regina Birdsell. I work at the Center for Nonprofit Management, and we are really excited to have you all together today. Thank you to Danielle and the Department of Cultural Affairs for making this possible, and thank you to Carolyn for making the time. We have a lot to learn from both of you today. You know, at the center, we know that for arts organizations, you guys play such a unique role in helping communities heal, bring joy, and we also know that this last year's been rough. So I thought I would share with you some information that we collected earlier this spring about what's happening in our sector. And then we wanted to ask you a couple of questions to help our speakers get a sense of, you know, kind of take the temperature of the room virtually. So, but most importantly, as Shmiza said, this is for you. So please put your questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get the answers. We're also going to have, as part of the session this morning, some time where you can talk to peers. We know that that's where the gold is. You know, be talking to each other about strategies that they've tried, opportunities you guys may be able to do together. That, you know, number one, you're not alone in this, and number two, there's a lot of smart people out there that you can tap that are part of this session this morning. So we hope you take advantage of that and then share what you learned. So with that, Shmiza, let's talk a little bit about where the sector snapshot took us, and then we'll get some information from those that are joining us this morning.
Awesome. I'm going to share my screen, pull up the sector section. Okay, can you all see me? See this? Perfect.
You and see that. Yes, thank you. All right, so every spring we have since the recession, coincidentally, been asking questions about how your organizations are doing financially, what you're seeing as you're responding to need, what's happening with your team, and what's in this year. We talked a little bit about going remotely, what the impact was on everyone who suddenly couldn't go to the workplace, host events, host fundraisers, all of the things that have been happening since the pandemic hit. We had 350 organizations respond to the survey. It was pretty equally distributed around budget size, mission, area, around the most 90% of the people that completed it were working in the county. But the trends have been pretty consistent. So let's take a look real quickly at what we heard. So we asked the question about how are you adapting? And not surprisingly, 74% said that they needed to respond to community needs. What that also told us is a lot of you were going outside of your mission. What we saw very quickly this spring is we're just going to do whatever it takes. Some people had to cut program budgets and service capacity simply because revenue went away so quickly. There was also, as you know, opportunities to furlough and put people on unemployment. In some cases, they were making a decent salary with some of the available government dollars, and that gave organizations a moment to pause, reduce their expenses, and take care of their people. The part that made us nervous was that 20% told us at the end of April and early May that they were starting to think about shutting down. And we offered a session with an attorney to help think about that. And it was a very popular, very troubling conversation, but it is the reality that we're in right now. So on the financial side, you all know the spring is when there are a lot of fundraisers. You know, April and May is usually a big time for organizations to raise money, and those stopped immediately. What we heard by the middle of March, in fact, was now we've got to do scenario planning because the big moneymaker didn't happen, and now we need to regroup. So that 64% at the time said there was an impact on fee for service. That's grown since then. The impact on donor revenue has been, as you would expect, in a crisis, what we usually see is kind of an uptick in community response, and then it goes away. So for some organizations, especially the ones on the front lines, providing food, housing, very grassroots, they saw sort of street level needs, saw more donors showing up. There was also a huge infusion, $100 million in rapid response money that philanthropy put together very quickly. But once again, it was largely around basic needs. What we know right now is that philanthropy is relooking, and that's the big foundations, all of the folks that you would expect, are now kind of regrouping with their boards to think about what do we do next? We can't keep giving at that level. And there are still programmatic needs out there that if we want organizations to survive and thrive. The interesting things for you guys is that they're also very clear that this is a time when healing needs to happen and that we need to bring people together to express their pain, tell their stories, share experiences. And I'm hoping, you know, you all know that Danielle actively advocates for this sector, and it's going to be tough in this economy, but you all have an important role to play. And so I'm really glad we're getting to talk today. But we also know all of the data is telling us that 40% of you told us that giving went down right away. And then government funding, every signal is be ready for a series of cuts. The county right now is looking at about 13%, but that's before the governor revises his budget in August. We expect things to go down again. That just means we're going to have to get really creative. And unfortunately, we're always stressed and stretched, and this is going to really bring out opportunities to try new things. All right, let's go to the next one. So a couple of things. I told you that there was a big shift to hiring freeze and furloughs. The other side of the equation was a real uptick in hiring. You know, if they were on the front lines, they had to add staff very quickly to meet needs. The other thing that's kind of interesting, and I'll be curious how this plays out for all of you for the rest of 2020, is some of the bigger organizations that were looking for partners so that they could move projects quickly to respond to needs. The numbers of people, anything around staff raises, that kind of became irrelevant. And then laying off staff, those numbers are shifting as you'd expect. But there are also many, many, many organizations that are very, very busy and not laying off staff. So I don't want to be the total Debbie Downer here. Our sector is still a major employer. We still have nearly 1 million people working in our sector to make life better for those living in our communities. 1 out of 7 jobs. Okay, next slide. All right, couple of things very quickly. Everyone's looking at ways to reduce costs. One of the things that's emerged is and this isn't going to be surprising to any of you, it's a confusing time based on the information coming from the government around protocols to keep people safe, to reduce the spread of the virus. The whole idea of mental health and well-being for your staff, and trying to make sure that you're not taking on any risks at a time when it's really hard to know. So definitely more dependence on technology, a lot more communication is required. And then what we saw was larger organizations looking at temporary leaves and access to federal and state benefits. You guys, I'm sure, heard from March until right now through the Small Business Administration, there was money being sort of pumped into the system so that people could keep their jobs and spend money to keep the economy going. In spite of the fact that it was, historic numbers of dollars, it was really not for the smaller groups, and it wasn't so much that nonprofits were left behind. It was just really skewed to organizations and businesses that had a really good relationship with your banker, and that the bankers were really on top of it. There was just so much, and there still is, so much confusion. So one of the people at the end of our program today that we're going to have available to you all is somebody that can kind of explain a little bit more about that. There is money out there, it's just hard to get. So, and really for large organizations, they're better positioned to pull those levers. All right, next slide. All right, oops.
Regina, this is
Oh, good, last one, I hope.
Yeah, the last
Oh,
one.
good. Oh, cool. Okay, so a couple of things that I hope you know. Things are changing quickly. What we have learned recently is, and we've been working hard with the county and with the city to talk about contracting, to talk about reporting, to talk about revisiting terms of contracts, and also to talk about subsidies for any of the PPE compared to PPP, any of the protective equipment and sanitation sort of equipment, all of that stuff that we're going to need to know a lot more about. So I know that the state is looking at creating a fund and also looking at procurement. I know that this, the city and the county are looking. So there's a lot moving, but I share that with you to just say that, wherever you can, keep an eye on sort of pandemic relief dollars. And we'll do our best to keep pumping information out as we find out where that can help smaller organizations, because I know that's where you guys need the help. So that's enough of me. We did want to ask a couple of questions from you. So Shmez is going to put up a couple of polls and tell us how you respond. We only have 3 questions. It's not a big stumper, but we want to get a sense of kind of where you're at. So first question, Shmez, you want to tee it up?
Hi, everyone. You should see a poll pop up, and you can just click on the answer, and then I will be sharing a little bit. And by the way, I just asked everyone if you could please just type your name into the chat. It's just for attendance purposes for some of the grantees. Thank you. I will be stopping the poll around 80%. Okay.
With everybody typing in the chat, some of us can't submit responses to the poll.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll give you some time. Almost everyone is on the poll. Okay. Perfect. Oh, there's a lot of people, so we're gonna give it some time. Now I'm gonna end the poll and share it. For the first one, there is 3. Can everyone see the sharing poll results? Rosina, can you see them?
Yeah, it's on my screen, so I'm imagining everyone else is seeing it. You want to do a thumbs up, you guys, if you're okay? You can see the results. All right, so adapting to virtual offerings, 56%, mostly 35%, and no 10%. All right, so should we go to the next question? Let's see what we learn.
And the next poll is up. Thank you everyone for putting your names in. I appreciate it.
All right, so 70% of you have seen new funding opportunities emerge. That's good news. We're going to want to learn about that. All right, Shmeza, next one. There you go. Hey, good job. Well, that's a nice way to end the question. So glad to see the optimism. I know that our sector is an optimistic can-do sector, and really excited to introduce somebody that probably doesn't need any introduction to you guys. Danielle Brazil is the general manager for the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. That means that she reports to Mayor Garcetti. And the great part about having her in this role is that she came from the nonprofit sector. She knows what it's like to run an organization, in fact, ran a coalition that helped bring more recognition and attention to the value of art and the role of artists and arts organizations. A longtime friend of CNM, and just really excited to be able to say, good morning, Danielle. Thanks for doing this today. Thank you for making this available. And thank you for the scholarships that allow all these guys to participate and not have to find the cash. We know that you guys have to fight for these dollars every year, and we appreciate it. So, so for all the joy and creativity and healing that those dollars make happen, we're really excited to talk together today and hear from you and Carolyn. So I'll turn it over to you, Danielle.
Thanks so much, Regina, and thanks to your team for pivoting and working so quickly to get this up really before the end of the fiscal year. You know, it has been an unbelievable time in our, you know, in the world. Being in the city is, oh man, what an interesting moment. Regina, you're right. I came from the nonprofit sector. As a matter of fact, it was a performance workshop at Highways Performance Space in the early 90s that really gave me the opportunity to find my voice, to develop a skill, to learn how to share that skill, learn how to organize and advocate, Over the past, 20 years, maybe longer, I don't know, I can't count. I've been working with so many of you on the screen to make sure that arts and culture is fully integrated with the civic life and civic values of our region. And I think that we have made some extraordinary strides over these years. This moment, pandemic, is putting us to the test. We have seen a precipitous drop in private philanthropy over the past 20 years in the arts sector, primarily small and mid-sized arts organizations that are deeply, deeply rooted in community and close to the ground. And I think that, to Regina's point, you are providing the healing, the community celebration, the system of appreciation and acknowledgement that is needed to witness community. And so I want to thank you for all of your incredible vision, for your partnership with the city, and for your eternal optimism and your true grit. I mean, we are incredibly tough, and I know that this time has been just so unbelievably difficult for so many of you. And look, we've pivoted, since 2004, we pivoted when, the grants budget was cut in half. And then we pivoted again in 2008, 2009, and we saved the Department of Cultural Affairs with Arts for LA. And, then we Cultural Affairs kind of built itself back. And now here we are faced at this other kind of new epic crisis where this isn't, a financial meltdown that's going to last a year or two. This is probably going to last longer. We are basically fully funded by hotel and occupancy tax, which is the hotel bed tax, which means we are incredibly vulnerable at the moment, given that tourism is down close to 85%. Our budget is based on projections, but we do not know, and we would not be surprised to see how mid-year cuts and whatnot. We already have a hiring freeze. We just got a contract freeze announcement. So we're trying to kind of figure out what all of this means. What I want to say is that the nonprofit arts and cultural model that we've been working with and trying to keep afloat over the past 20, 30 years is now, its future has a big question mark around it. We have got to find new models for accessing capital, especially in the nonprofit sector. I'm very optimistic because I think that when we put our energy towards what we can build and what we can grow, we will get that. We will be successful. We've seen, the county just recently adopted the first ever cultural policy, which means that arts and culture will be integrated with every other county department. The city and county have a wonderful little little sister, big brother relationship. I don't know if that's the right framing, but what I love is that can we in the city leverage that moment to turn the mirror onto the city and say, here's an opportunity for you in the city. When COVID hit, we responded pretty quickly, and I got to give a shout out to our grants team, Joe Smoke and Ben Espinoza and Brenda Reynolds, for doing everything they can to make sure that every grantee in our portfolio, and we have about 350, would be paid as quickly as possible. We wanted to be able to get the money out the door. We also had a partnership with community partners doing a Arts Activation Fund program, and we were able to pivot that and provide micro grants to artists who lost work. That fund is still up right now. It's in its third round. And for those of you that have artists in your within your organizations that lost wages, I would get to community partners ASAP before those funds run out. I think all in all, we were able to move at least $350,000 I was really inspired by the Getty. The Visual Art Fund is great, but I think performing arts organizations are incredibly hard hit. The overhead alone, not being able to monetize performances, really puts you in a real double whammy. And I think that performing arts will likely, not be able to open up as quick as some of the other disciplines. I also want to just say that our public art team has really reimagined how we could hire artists and through our public commissioning process. We're still working out those plans, but we just put up a report up to council for a new, it's about $1 million, with $500,000 in mural commissions. And then we have another project that we'll be putting up shortly. So I'm gonna kind of pause here, and I want to just kind of reframe of like, public support is absolutely so critical here in Los Angeles. What I want to make sure that everybody on this call is engaged with is Arts for LA. I had the great pleasure of running Arts for LA for close to 9 years before the mayor tapped me to run cultural affairs. And so I think in this moment, we need to make sure that the advocacy is incredibly robust around the public value of arts and culture. And given that I'm on the inside now, I need you guys to work on the outside while I work with my team on the inside, so we can make sure that there's robust public voice. There's a lot of voices right now that is driving policymaking, and I don't think that they're hearing from the arts community. So that's your council member and that's your mayor. I had the great pleasure of meeting Carolyn Hall, who is the new head of our city's Economic Workforce Development Department. At a retreat that the mayor did, gosh, Carolyn, was that in January? And
it was hard, but
and I had, oh, who's there? Somebody, kid, is that Z, Nari? Anyway, so let me get back to Carolyn. I had a chance to introduce myself to Carolyn, and she said, oh, I want to let you know that I'm an arts fan. And Dolores Chavez is a good friend of mine. I met her when I was, when she was at Center Theater Group, and we lived right across from each other. And there was just such a wonderful moment to say, oh my gosh, you are the head of economic development workforce for the city of Los Angeles. Prior to that, Carolyn was at Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation. And prior to that, she was at the CRA. And what I think is so incredibly exciting about having Carolyn with us today is she actually understands maybe what many of us don't understand around how to reimagine, how to rethink, how to access small business support, loans, etc. What we can do to start building our muscle to ensure that we have the readiness to access the capital. And so I'm just so thrilled that she agreed to come on and share with us a little bit about her story, introduce herself to us and us to her, and know that she's part of our family because she loves the work that you all do. So Carolyn, I want to hand it off to you. Thank you again for being with us, and I can't wait to hear what you got to say.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I do have a short presentation that I'm going to go through, and in part of that presentation, I will tell you a little bit of my story and talk about some of the work that we're doing at the Economic and Workforce Development Department. But I'm very hopeful that it will stimulate a conversation because I love interacting based on the questions that people ask me. So, like I said, it's a real pleasure to speak with you today about the creative arts and the pivotal role that it plays in our regional economy. The current public health crisis resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic has dealt a swift and heavy blow to the region, and nowhere is this pain being felt more acutely than in the creative sectors. During the course of the discussion this morning, I'll present data that shows the economic impact of the creative arts sector, the current declines in employment, and I will present some thoughts on how to prepare for upcoming funding opportunities and potential collaborations. At the end, I'd really enjoy, like I said, an engagement about your thoughts. But as I was preparing my remarks for today, I asked myself the following question: why do the creative arts matter? And if we could move to the next slide. It's a simple question. And I started to respond by putting together slides on the economic impact of the sector. But then I paused and I realized that that wasn't what I garnered from the arts. And what I get from the art goes beyond the multiplier effects. It has helped me imagine new worlds. Let's go to the next slide. Just want everyone to know, I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey. And in fact, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a yellow arrow on one of the pictures there. That's actually the street that I grew up on. And my childhood neighborhood had all the hallmarks of a community that had suffered decades of disinvestment. But there were a few dedicated nonprofits that galvanized the community. And with their guidance, we turned fences that attempted to shield the vacant, blighted lots into canvases for community art projects. And the community petitioned to have public art that represented the Black experience constructed at the nearby transit stations. These same organizations took me to my first museum, where I experienced the paintings of Romare Bearden, the sculptures of Augusta Salvage, and lost my place here. Bear with me for a second. Oh yeah, okay, I'm sorry. So let me go back for a second. So in Jersey City, where I grew up, these nonprofits allowed me the experience of being exposed to Romare Bearden, Augusta Salvage, and they took me to my first theater production for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow was not enough. Without the arts, I may have never received my bachelor's degree from Carnegie Mellon University. And I certainly would never have gone to the London School of Economics, where I received my master's degree in urban planning and economics. And I certainly would not have gone to MIT, where I received my certificate in finance. The creative arts played such a critical role in allowing me to imagine a world both within and outside the confines of the neighborhood in Jersey City. That's why the arts eventually are so important, because it allows us to imagine a world. It goes beyond the multiplier effects, which is why it's so important as we look at government funding that we keep the funding for the arts, because without those opportunities, we don't get to imagine a new world. Now, I'm appropriately tasked with implementing the comprehensive economic development strategy for the city of Los Angeles. And let me just share with you what that vision is, because I think it's really important. The vision for our strategy for Los Angeles is to leverage its position as a gateway to the Pacific Rim and other world markets, to grow our economy for the benefit of all Angelenos, building on our unparalleled culture of creativity and leadership and innovation. We will expand our regional, national, global presence by investing in our people, our neighborhoods, and our industries. That's important because what we're saying in that vision is that the cultural arts, defined by entertainment and digital media, creative goods and products, fashion, fine arts, performing arts, are at the center of our vision of what economic development is for the city of Los Angeles. And I know that many of you are familiar with the Otis report. The data in the 2020 edition reinforces the fact that the creative economy has a strong presence in the LA County labor market, and it's employing you can go to the next one, employing 13% of the region's workforce. This creative ecosystem also supports, as I think many of us know, hundreds of thousands of other jobs in LA County. For example, the impact of the creative economy on the county's restaurants, bars, food trucks illustrates its downstream effects. So when we talk about the creative arts, we're not just talking about the nonprofits and the work that you do on the ground. We're talking about a whole ecosystem that supports small businesses throughout. So as we go down, we can go to the next slide. Oh, yeah, we're good. We're good there. So I want to just talk a little bit about the Los Angeles economy and how it's been impacted by COVID-19. What these slides are really showing us is that COVID-19 had an outsized impact in Los Angeles County, where unemployment has risen more than the rest of California or the nation. In Los Angeles, I believe that number is the end of April, our unemployment rate was at 20.7%. And key sectors like leisure and hospitality shed record levels of jobs. And the full impact of the employment has still not been completely discerned. It's now estimated that if you look at the bottom chart, employment in LA County dropped from 68% of the population on March 20th to 44% of the population on April 30th, meaning that over half of the county is struggling to regain their jobs due to COVID-19. So let's take a look at the small businesses. We can go to the next slide. Los Angeles' small businesses are concentrated in industries disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. The initial data from April shows that the hardest hit industries in Los Angeles are comprised mostly of small businesses employing 1 to 19 people. And if you can see there, the arts, entertainment, and recreation employment had gone down by 34%, a significant hit in that sector alone. And in the nonprofit industry, and I'd love your feedback on some of the numbers that we have here. We can go to the next slide. The Los Angeles nonprofit community consists mostly, our data shows, of small organizations employing less than 26 employees. While there are clearly very large foundations and nonprofits, the vast majority are just simply relatively small. With increased unemployment and a strain on communities, 50% of the nonprofits, this data is a little dated by now because it was in April and things are moving very fast. But at the time, 50% of nonprofits have reported an increase in demand for their services. And despite this increased demand, 83% of the nonprofits had suffered financially due to COVID-19. These nonprofits are experiencing unprecedented losses in revenues as fundraising events are canceled, earned revenues are cut off, and donations are redirected to larger organizations. So as I looked at this, and as Danielle and I talked about kind of how we reimagine what we do, what you do in nonprofits, there's an opportunity here to look at what you're actually doing in terms of your organizations. And we have to collectively look at and integrate strategies to support cultural institutions and small businesses within the creative arts. And it's really critical as we look at those creative arts and your organizations to have knowledge and know about the various programs that are going to occur. It was alluded to earlier that the county and the city are working on a fund. It hasn't been released yet. But one of the challenges we found from our previous iterations of providing funding is that many small businesses, particularly those in the creative arts and the nonprofits, were unable to get through the application process. So it's really important as we work together collaboratively that we connect with the technical assistance that's needed so that you have the paperwork ready. So when these funds open up, that you're actually able to apply very rapidly because all of the programs are oversubscribed. So one of the things that I'd recommend is that the City of Los Angeles operates 9 work source centers. And if you're not tapped into those work source centers already, I would say work with me offline or go to our website and find out the locations of those work source centers. They will virtually work with you to look at various and sundry different funds that are available. And that's almost half the battle, is actually knowing what's out there, knowing what the requirements are, and getting the technical assistance that you need. I would also say that in sort of reimagining what you do, kind of looking at yourself as like a small business and creating a relationship with community development financial institutions, CDFIs. Oftentimes, in fact, CDFIs are structured to work with businesses and nonprofits in low-income communities. So reimagining your relationship with your bank and kind of looking at a community development financial institution that will also provide you with the technical assistance, because there's a significant amount of private sector, government and non-government resources that are available. And it's important, again, to kind of be in tune with those resources that are out there. Another thing that's really critical is to look at what you do. Many of your organizations actually do workforce development. What are your functions? You actually do economic development. And there's funds out there like WIOA dollars that my department functions with, and we have providers that we give funding to do internships, youth programs. If your nonprofit is actually doing workforce development, it's a good idea to start looking at some of your relationships and who's in your network, because maybe there's an opportunity to partner with other providers to provide a greater services in terms of that training, and there'll be a significant amount of dollars coming down the pipe for dislocated workers in the next year or two. So again, kind of reimagining your network, rethinking your network, looking at what economic development really means for what your organization is doing, because there are federal dollars that are coming down from the Economic Development Administration, EDA, that's looking at how businesses have been impacted by COVID-19. And again, many of the creative arts, I believe, because they're smaller, are not actually tapping into those dollars that are available, because you have been impacted, extremely impacted, as was shown on the previous slide. There are other aspects that are coming out of government now as we as a country look at racial healing and how we can move forward. And I know there's ideas about peace centers. Well, many organizations have facilities where they can actually, instead of building new peace facilities or peace centers, how can we use what we're currently doing, what you're currently doing, and kind of reimagine your business plan to tap into those federal dollars that are going to go toward racial healing. I think Danielle and I talked a little bit about the library system. Again, another network of facilities. What COVID-19 and the pandemic has taught us is that many communities don't have the same broad bandwidth. And so there are many youth that need actually to go to libraries so that they can access the computer, so they can actually get online services. Well, that's actually taking care of youth services. And there's a pool of money that's available for youth services. So the real critical issue for us right now is looking at how we can tap into those federal dollars, CARES Act funding, to kind of redefine some of the work that you do as workforce development, economic development, youth training. So you can access those dollars. The other most important thing is for the team to actually go out and get technical assistance. And in doing technical assistance, you're able to look at those private dollars as well as those public dollars that are available. So in summary to everything I've said, I think really what I'm talking about is having and rethinking our relationships within your organizations, outside of your organizations, with economic development corporations, the economic development department, and workforce. And how can we work with all of you to actually put together programs, to be providers, and to look at tapping into federal dollars? I'm happy to open it up, and I'm actually would welcome your questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Carolyn. We actually do have a few questions in the chat. I think I'm going to go just down the line just to let people first come, first serve. But the presentation will we be able to share this presentation with everyone? I believe so, right?
Sure.
Perfect. And then Christy Wilkins was wondering what police funding is being considered to be redirected to support community-based arts agencies?
I believe that's all gone through council and they're redirecting the funds. And Danielle, you may know about this better than I. I don't think they've actually put a dollar amount to specific programs.
That's correct. And I think that this week, Budget and Finance Committee met. They are recommending to put 100 million or 150 million from LAPD into staving off furloughs for 40,000 city employees. There was actually two efforts. One was 150 redirect from LAPD, or up to 150, and then another 100 million coming from other departments. Budget and Finance took up the first 150, and they have a proposal to use that for potentially furloughs. But on yesterday, the labor came out with the CAO, excuse me, Chief Administrative Officer, with a early retirement program, and that early retirement program would essentially tip the financial scales for the city, so we'd be able to be solvent through the end of the year if there were enough employees to take part in that early retirement. So council did not act on the 150 million because they're now going to wait to see if the furloughs are staved off through early retirement. And I think that gives you an indication on just how complicated things are, given that these are council motions. And so it's being driven in a sense by the legislative side of our government. And I also think that this is where being able to hear from, the sector and the nonprofit sector around how the work that you're all doing may be serving the very communities that those monies are supposed to be getting to. So I'll stop there.
Let me just follow up on that. There was a motion to provide EWDD with $30 million in additional funding for loans. It has not gone to council yet. In that 30 million, we had an $11 million pot previously, which was oversubscribed. Nonprofits were able and are able to apply for those funds. And that's another reason why I think it's really important to work with your business source centers to make sure you have your paperwork in place so that you can actually access those dollars.
And I want to just underscore that because, I think that when every program is oversubscribed. And so if you don't have your paperwork in order, or you don't have that relationship with the Worksource Center or the CDFI, you won't be able to get in fast enough when CARES Act money, because is that 30 million CARES Act money, Carolyn, or is it just?
It is actually currently considered CARES Act money.
Yeah, so I think that this is the most important opportunity that we all have on the table right now. And we have a little bit of a window for you all to literally today call your workforce center. And let me just clarify with Carolyn, a workforce center is in a sense the CDFI, correct?
It's the business source centers. We run the work source centers, youth centers, and the business centers. The business centers are those that you would contact because some of them are CDFIs, not all of them are CDFIs. The Vermont Slauson EDC, for example, is a CDFI. Some others are not, but they're all available to do technical assistance. Our work source centers are actually there to help individuals as they're seeking employment. But
Great.
Some CDFIs like LISC and others are also providing technical assistance.
Great.
Awesome. So we have a lot of questions, which is totally understandable. I'm going to try and just keep in the flow while I have you on Carolyn. Carolyn, can you provide an example? This is from Sean Kowelty. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Can you provide an example of how a small or mid-sized organization has received funding in workforce development, or share info about their approach to apply for that funding? Example, seeking partners, where funding is, etc. Also, workforce development is very difficult right now when it's not possible to congregate in person. So I guess the first one is, can you provide an example of how small or mid-sized organization has received funding in workforce development?
Yeah, Vermont Slough-on EDC is a good example. The Brotherhood Crusades, another example of small to mid-sized organizations that have received additional funding from their initial contracts to assist in the technical assistance. I'm sorry, you're talking about workforce development. We're doing a lot, that's a really good question. We are doing a significant, in fact, we're doing all of our workforce development right now virtually, with the exceptions of kind of some walk-in appointments. And we have found that actually being able to do it between the community colleges and ourselves virtually, while we're still working out the kinks, we've been pleasantly surprised that we've been able to move to an online format fairly quickly. We're actually now trying that out right now with our youth summer internships. We just did an online it used to be that the applications came in, I believe, through, they go into the youth source centers and do the applications. We brought on a tech company to create an online service so that now the youth can upload their information online. And we are looking at, and we're working with organizations to do online virtual internships. So to answer your question, you do have to be part of the providers, and I could work with whoever sent that question to me directly to get more information on how to become a provider. But we have expanded our list of providers in the recent months.
Awesome. There are a lot of questions, so if we don't get to you all, I will save them so that the LEDCA has them as well. We are saving everything in the chat. But there was a question on, can you just repeat some of the, okay, actually, here we go. Are these potentially available funds always loans via CARES, or are there granting programs you can tell us about?
Really good question. Right now, and I'd actually like to hear from some of you about whether whether you have the capacity for loans or not, because you have an opportunity now to to have an input into how we structure a couple of our programs. Right now, the ones that we're working on, a couple of them we're working, have grant and loan programs. The grant programs are a certain amount that will, like between $5,000 and $20,000. That we will send out to nonprofits and businesses through a lottery system. The loan programs we're still structuring that, but it's looking at low interest loans. And I'm curious, and maybe this is a question you guys can have at a later point, how much capacity any of the nonprofits have for debt. And I suspect not much. But
Carolyn, I'd love to talk to you about that, because what we find is they need a lot of flexibility.
So they can have loans though, because if we can have loans with a lot of flexibility, I'll tell you why this is important. We can get the banks, which need to come in at the senior debt level, to be interested. They cease being interested at the grant, then they shove us off to their philanthropic arms. But we don't.
What we've heard is really there's an appetite for bridge loans where money might be coming, but they need, what we see a lot, Shmeza, I'm sure, is noticing a lot of, we're very fragile right now. We need to move quickly. But if there's money coming, those sorts of bridge loans are really helpful, and then some flexibility, and also some capacity training through maybe some of the workforce development efforts and even stuff at CNM to really make sure that you have your business plan in order so that they can have some confidence.
Yeah, well, that's actually another good point. At our work business source centers and with our technical assistant advisors, they can work on their business plans and for no charge. And
Right.
Also there's Bixel Exchange, the business development center, and the several small business development centers around the county. Because sustainability is really the issue for us right now. We have to look at these business plans, work with what the vision is, and then have a sustainable plan. So I'm happy again to send out the information about the business development centers around the county. And if people are not working on getting, like LADC has a connectory that puts out regular information about webinars on small businesses. And I would highly recommend kind of getting on those newsletters and finding out what's coming up next. Because information.
So we can assemble those links and then send it to everybody that's on this call. So
Okay.
make it really easy for people to find it. Because one of the questions that's coming up is how do we keep up with the opportunities that are coming online so we can react, to Danielle's point, you know, be ready to jump. So anything we can do to make that easy, happy to do that.
Yeah, let's do that. And I'll also put you in contact with Jamie Francisco, our public relations individual, who's on top of that sort of stuff.
Great.
Awesome. Okay, everyone, we have an overwhelming amount of questions. Laura, hi, I did see you raise your hand, but I'm going to just parking lot it for a later time so we can keep moving on. We do have a break right now, I believe, right, Leslie? Are we just waiting it?
But keep going, keep going.
You want to ask a few more questions? Is that fine? Okay. Laura, hi. If you have your hand raised, you want to speak up a little bit?
Hi, I would love to. Thank you so much to Danielle and Carolyn for making yourselves available right now and speaking to this sector. It's such a difficult time for everybody, and clearly based on all of the questions that we're getting, you know, this information is incredibly helpful, and I'm so grateful to CNM for this conversation, facilitating this conversation, and all of the webinars that you've been making available since the start of COVID, and how we access these funds as this sector, and how the sector can work together to support each other and advocate for resources for everybody, for this entire group of people. But clearly, based on all of the questions coming through, what is not being addressed, and what I know is very sensitive to address in this context, in any context. And I'm guessing that, you know, Danielle and Carolyn might not be able to speak to a lot of these questions, might not have answers to these questions. But I think the larger question is, yes, getting access to these funds, getting access to these loans, even though I really don't believe taking on debt is the solution for our sector, for our very small, very fragile organizations that do not have business plans, that do not know how to access workforce funds. And so I guess my kind of two-part question is, one, you know, giving us really specific, direct websites, who we can contact for all of that kind of workforce development, how we as small businesses, nonprofits, can access those funds immediately to be able to retain our staffs, because obviously if us as organizations are worried about keeping our staffs employed, we cannot even think about the long-term loans and viability. But my bigger question is, as Will is questioning, is, you know, this issue at the city council level about police funding and reallocating police funding. And I know we can't obviously address and the council needs to work through what that amount is and where those go. How can we as a sector support you, Danielle, support you, Carolyn? How do we effectively advocate for this redistribution of funds that would ultimately support our arts and culture sector and all of the staff that we are employing and the artists that we are trying to support, to give us insight and the long-term kind of healing of our communities.
Jenny, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to say Arts for LA, Arts for LA, Arts for LA. We need to have one unified voice. We need to have clear data, and we need to have a robust showing of that voice inside council. I, in my position, cannot organize you. Arts for LA, and this is an interesting comment that just came up from Martha. Arts for LA speaks for fine arts community or fine artist community. And I would also say that, you know, you have, you know, LA Stage, we have LA Stage Alliance, Center for Nonprofit, CCI, Center for Cultural Innovation. We have Dance Resource Center. You know, there needs to be a very large coalition with the arts speaking in one voice that can demonstrate the impact that our sector has on the very communities that we're trying to serve specifically with this 150 million, and it may actually be 200 million if another million comes through. This is going to be decided legislatively, which means that members of council are going to come to an agreement on that, and members of council needs to hear from their constituency. And if the arts are not at the table, I think that's the thing. If you're not on the table, you're on the menu, right?
Right.
And so, you know, it's really, really important. I'm so glad that LA Stage Alliance is here and that you will work with Arts for LA regularly, and feel free to email you. We are vigorously working the inside channels, Carolyn and I, as well as, I will also say this, as well as a lot of council colleagues, as well as mayor's office, as well as the city administrative officer. We've done some really great work in demonstrating our value. But I think really right now, if you don't have a voice in the meetings, you won't be considered. And so that's the piece that I just really want to stress.
And I think that's a good point. And also, I think it's really important to stress, I mean, some of the data that I showed about how the arts are such a critical component of the downstream economy. When we're talking about what's happening to restaurants and other small retailers, it's the arts community that's such a great multiplier effect. And the fact that it's a job creator. So in kind of making those points, it becomes about the arts, about economic development and workforce development. Kind of melding those three together, I think, makes a strong argument.
And let me just clarify, because Jocelyn said, I'm concerned that you mentioned the arts are not at the table legislatively. Why is Arts for LA not at the table? So let me clarify. I can't speak to Arts for LA because I'm no longer with the organization. That's a question for Arts for LA, but what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is when I listen to public comment for budget and finance, or when I listen to public comment for council meetings, I do not hear the arts. That's what I'm saying.
Danielle, can I ask you a question? How successful was this group in accessing PPP?
You know, I think that's a really great question. I don't have an official poll on it. Maybe this is something Regina can say, but I would gather not very well.
Yeah,
you're either too big or you're too small.
Yeah, for the small organizations, they were just left behind. And you know, all the systems are so oversubscribed. Right. You know, even if they were in line in the, you know, somewhere in the queue, they didn't make it. Certainly for the first wave, we had a better result second wave, partly because there was a lot of noise about what happened to small business and what happened to nonprofits for money that went through the SBA. So, you know, the thing that I'm really struck by from both of you is that right now it sounds like it takes phone calls. It takes calling the offices and saying, this is the role that we want to play in healing Los Angeles. And that we are a workforce, that we do have data that we bring money into the market because we raise money from all over. And that not just with the LAPD money, but just as they're making hard choices, I think what I've heard from the city council and from the mayor is that they're looking for efficient ways to get the city healing, right? And to get people talking and into economic recovery and COVID recovery and the uprising recovery. So it seems like for now, it would matter that offices are getting a lot of phone calls and emails from organizations working in their districts, because you've got 15 districts that are thinking about 15 districts, right?
Yeah, and I would also say that what's really important is that the talking points are pretty consistent, and I think this is where working with the coalition, with Arts for LA, LA Stage, DRC, CCI, Center for Nonprofit Management, staying focused on the impact, not, depersonalize, never personalize it, really focus on your part of the solution. I was really happy to hear Flory got a PPE loan. I know those, but I would love to actually, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Flory, but I think that's a really important piece, that there are success stories here. But I would just really stress that you've got to have the relationship with your council office. It's a very, our city charter and our city structure is in a sense a very strong city council. They control land use. They oversee this year's budget is primarily going to be overseen by council, given the revenue fluctuations. I think a lot is weighing on the election in November and whether or not there's going to be a leadership transition at the federal level. The city is very concerned about its revenue projections and the loss of revenue, and really being able to keep the city afloat post third, fourth quarter. So I think everybody that mentioned that they're more concerned about 2021, I would share that with you. So I'll stop there and hand it back over.
Awesome. So I just launched a poll, everyone, just really quickly, just in how many of you all here in this room, it's about 100 received PPP money. So it's not you, your org, obviously, but just want to clarify that. Just click on it just to see how we're all are in this room. And then one final question. I really do appreciate there is a lot of them, and we will save it and share this with Danielle so that we can, so she can see what is in the chat as well. But just want to close off on Laura's question. Danielle, how can orgs best advocate and have a relationship with their council members? What is your tip?
Well, the way that you always want to have a relationship with any kind of partner is you want to be able to build that relationship, of course, before there's a crisis so that you can pick up the phone. If you don't have a relationship with your council member, I think what you want to do is you want to find out who the arts deputy is, and you want to start saying, here's how we're keeping the spirit of this district up through this work. You want to be able to say, here's what we're doing, and we know that everything is in crisis, but we want to be helpful and we want to be a partner with you with maintaining the spirit and the economy of our city and making sure that you can be ready to accelerate economic recovery, which is, as to Carolyn's point, we are an interconnected economy. The arts and cultural support restaurants and parking and babysitters and all the indirect expenses and economic activity that circulate the arts. So we are a critical anchor, and we also have the entertainment industry, the fashion industry, the design industry here. And so as soon as those jobs come back, we've got the workforce that need to be able to go back into work, but we're central to that pipeline. So to me, these are the things that making sure that you can always just, build that relationship. I know there's a tremendous amount of support for arts and culture on the council side. They're always going to weigh things via political will. And so if they hear enough and enough of the vision that you all have, they'll come around. But it's got to be consistent and it's got to be on message.
Danielle, can I ask a quick question? You could say no if there's no time, but it would help me because we're putting together the eligibility and the requirements of a loan grant fund. It would be great if we could have a quick poll to see how many organizations would be interested in flexible debt. Would you mind asking folks?
Yeah, so what can you ask me?
This is Leslie. I don't know if you got my message. How you doing?
Wrong. Hey, Carolyn, did you want that right now?
No, whenever you need it, whenever you can do it.
And
but
what is the question again? Can you type it out? Can you tell me again? Sorry.
It's how many nonprofits would, if there was a loan product that had a flexible repayment from 0 to 5 years, low interest rates, would that be something that they would be interested in?
Okay, perfect. And I'll make that right now.
And I'm surprised at how many people got PPP. I think 49% said they got PPP.
Awesome. Okay, and I'm gonna launch it. Just give me 1 minute. So we are a little bit we should be having a break soon if you all feel comfortable. If you want to keep going, we can, but it'd be nice to, before introducing Paul, to give us some time to kind of take a break and come back. So it's a really good conversation. I really do appreciate it. And I'll come back and I'll bring up that poll after our next 5 minutes. So I would just say we are on break. Please mute yourselves. Please turn off your camera and take a stretch. Leslie, do you want to go?
Yeah, no, I just want to first thank you, Caroline and Danielle. We hope you still be part of the conversation as we go on. We thank you very much for your insights and your words. As we know, this is just the ongoing conversation that we're all having, and it's an evolving situation, and we know it's an interesting time. So thank you for your input, thank you for the questions. As Shmeza said, we'll come back in 5 minutes and keep the conversation going.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that. I hope it was useful.
Absolutely.
Hey, Team CNM, it's Joe Smoke. Can you hear me?
Hey, Joe. Yep.
I just
Hey,
wanted
Joe.
to say you're doing an awesome job. We love it.
Good, good, good.
Thanks.
So much.
Good.
We were
Glad to
looking for
hear.
you there.
Super comprehensive, super thoughtful, absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Carolyn, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. We did run a loan fund when I first came here. Take no credit for it, but it had some interesting components and some lessons that we learned along the way.
Oh, would you mind? I'd love to have an opportunity to talk to you about that.
Absolutely. And Danielle, you know, it'd be really easy if you guys think it would be helpful. You know, we can collect some of the key messages that are coming from CII and Arts for LA and, you know, let people know what some of the key themes are.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, it's so hard to, you know, like I'm an organizer at heart in many ways, and that, you know, that artist space, and I'm like, I can't do it, but you guys can, go for it.
We can. And the other thing that we know, and Joe and I have talked about this a lot, is that, you know, the more that all these people talk about the results that they're getting, you know, the changes that they're seeing, you know, it helps make the case. And there's information out there. We're just not always good at telling our own story. So the more consistent we can be, that builds capacity for these organizations, which is always something we all care about.
Danielle, I was curious, do you have, you mentioned art deputy? Is that like, is there a list, or is there someone that people can find who that is or what that is?
Yeah, you know, the council offices will generally have, you know, they'll have various portfolios assigned to a deputy. So, you know, it's generally, you know, community services and arts, or education and arts, or sometimes they put it within the economic development. They're always kind of shifting and changing a little bit. So every time we build a list, it changes. And Arts for LA may have a different list than we have, because it's just the various people that we work with. The county's really different. You know, the county has 5 supervisors, and their arts deputy, you know, the deputies kind of stay throughout the entire term, whereas in the city, there's a lot of turnover. So I think that's what makes it a little bit more difficult to build a relationship, quote, with the office.
Awesome, thank you so much. I'm looking and pulling some stuff so I can put it in the chat.
Should we reassemble, you guys? Because we're gonna run out of time, I think.
Yeah, but we're gonna do it in a minute. Paul just joined us.
Great.
Paul, wait, yeah, Paul, are you there?
Did Paul come in already? Did you let him in?
Yes.
Hi, sorry, I unmuted. Hello.
Welcome. We're gonna give people about another minute, and everybody can come back, and we'll reconvene and keep the conversation going.
Great.
Hey, Paul, thank you for doing this.
Oh, of
So,
course.
you know, there's just a lot of questions. As you've been working on SBA loans, there's a lot of questions about where smaller arts organizations fit in that. And, and also the sort of, as Danielle and Carolyn were talking about, you know, the government loans versus government grants versus small organizations and some of the opportunities that might not be the best fit.
Yeah.
So I think we just want to sort of try to level set on that. And then about half, you should know, Paul, that about half of the people on the call, just a little shy of half, said that they did get PPP loans.
Oh, terrific. Okay. And how many are on the call? About
100.
Wow. Okay. So about 50 got PPP. Okay. That's good to know.
And then, you know, some of them are just feeling like they're too small. And, you know, what we've talked about is some of the resource, and you're not responsible for this, some of the resources that are available to small organizations to get sort of trained, sort of technical assistance so that they can find out what's available and then how to fill out the applications and all that stuff. So thought we'd like to just get a sort of high level sense from you about what is currently in the pipeline and then who might be the best fit for that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Welcome back. Let's everybody, since you've heard the start of the conversation, these conversations don't end as we go through everything. So I'll turn it back over to Regina to announce our next presenter.
Okay, thanks, Leslie, and thanks, everybody. You know, we've been keeping an eye on the chat, and we wanted to make sure, as Danielle was talking about, really the theme today is access to capital. And how do we make sure that you have the money to do the work that you're trying to do at a time when the economy is so punishing and the pandemic is making it extra tricky. So what we thought, Paul's been working for the last several months on with SBA programs providing technical assistance. So we thought it would be important to find out and get updated on sort of what's coming online. I know there's some deadlines that are right now, and that really who are they targeting. And so Paul, just wanted to have a conversation with you about kind of what you think these organizations should know about these dollars and who might be the best fit.
Hey, you bet. Thanks, Regina. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Apologize, I'm on a phone. I'm actually in Phoenix visiting my folks. But you know, it's strange times for all of us. I've got an interesting background, and I just want to share it with you briefly to give you a little context on this. I've previously worked at the California Community Foundation for many years on their board, as well as in their development group. I ran Red Cross for LA for a number of years. So I've been on the begging for funds side, as well as the distributing of funds. And then in the last few months, I've really focused on the SBA and the programs that they have opened up, primarily for small business, but also taking advantage of for nonprofits. I jumped into this field because I thought there was such an opportunity with the PPP. And it sounds like about half of you on this call have applied for and gotten PPP forgivable loans, and fantastic. I think that's terrific. The reason I loved PPP so much was not so much the loan aspect, although that was helpful. It was the forgivable loan. And so when I talked to all of my small business friends around the country, every single one of them was applying for the PPP. Now, they tended to have larger businesses, even for a small business, you know, 10, 20, 30 or more employees. They had a business that had just stopped in many cases, but they anticipated it was going to come back very quickly. And in some cases it has. So this was really to get them through. The PPP was really originally designed to keep employees off of unemployment and to keep them with their companies. So the original deadline, which is still the deadline for applying for PPP, is June 30th, which, as you all know, is right around the corner. The objective was to keep them with their small businesses or their nonprofits and not have them go to unemployment. It had a number of challenges, which we don't have to go into all of those. The biggest one being, of course, it ran out of money very quickly on the first round. And unless you had an established, solid business relationship with your bank, it was extremely difficult to access. So it was a story of the haves and have-nots. For the larger organizations, the larger small businesses that had that small business personal banker, they went right through. If they didn't, if they had a checking account with a bank, I have a checking account with Wells Fargo, I'm running a very small nonprofit, it was a little bit of good luck because the banks were mainly focused on their more solid business customers was a reality. And they weren't making enough money on this program to really use it to expand their customer base or to get to know you. So congratulations on the 50 of you who ran the gauntlet and got through. They have made it better over time. They allocated more funds for the PPP, as you all know. In fact, there's still currently about $120 billion that is still not allocated for PPP that theoretically will run out June 30th. And unless they change the legislation, it actually will run out. As I've mentioned, it's been very difficult to run the gauntlet, and it has been, unfortunately, very confusing. The SBA just issued their 18th interim final rule, preceded by 17 other interim final rules. So it's been a lot to keep up with for all of you, and I understand that. In particular, we were hit because Wells Fargo ran out of money literally on the first day because of their own issues and didn't come back up for another week or so. So needless to say, there have been challenges. On the other hand, there's been 5 million loans that have been given out for the PPP, hundreds of billions of dollars. If you had a banking relationship, you could get it. And they've relaxed the rules. Now 60% can go to payroll, 40% can go to non-payroll issues around your nonprofit. You can use the money over 24 weeks instead of just 8 weeks, which is also very helpful. And if you use it on the right expenses, you can get 100% of that loan forgivable. So all that is really good news. If you decide to keep it as a loan, it's got a 5-year payback and 1% interest. So that's pretty good as well. So there's a number of good reasons to, for those of you who applied for and got the PPP, I wish you good luck in getting your loan forgiven. There's a lot of rules around that as well, but they have made it simpler, and I hope you're keeping track of that as well. They have a new form that you can fill in called the 3508EZ, which is supposed to make it easier to get your loan forgiven. And just so you know, they did say they're going to audit a number of these firms that have applied for PPP, but that's almost entirely in the larger businesses that borrowed $2 million. It's not for the really small nonprofits. So I really would not be fearful of audits, particularly if you're spending the money on approvable expenses. If you're self-employed or an independent contractor, you could get to about $20,000 reimbursable. So there's a number of good aspects to that PPP, and I was so excited about it because of the forgivable nature. If you are still considering it, you have to really hustle because the deadline is right around the corner. Some banks are not taking any more new loans. So you're basically on deadline there. The other program I jumped into from the SBA in a fortuitous way is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So this is more of a traditional loan that nonprofits and small for-profits are eligible for. In the current configuration, you can borrow up to $150,000. It's not secured on any part of your organization. It's an unsecured loan. There's no payments for the first 12 months. And then after that, the interest is 3.75%. And you can take out the loan for up to 30 years. If you pay it back early, there's no prepayment penalties. I've actually joined the SBA about 3 weeks ago. I'm taking a little break right now. And I've been processing these EIDL loans, the average being probably around $50,000. And I've seen typically about 50 of these per day. They are almost all businesses. I see very few nonprofits applying for these loans. And I'm seeing interactions with a number of the customers who are applying. A typical situation, I say the very typical would be you run a nail salon and you've been shut down for 3 months and you are just now coming back online. And customers are, for many of the nail salons, customers are flocking back to nail salons. So there's plenty of demand there, but they literally had no income coming in for 3 months. They're borrowing money to literally just keep themselves afloat. But they're seeing a very good revenue stream that is already starting, and they really expect in July as well, that can help them cover that loan. Where I'm much more nervous in my conversations, and particularly with nonprofits and small nonprofits, is I want you to be very, very wary of loans as opposed to grants, because the loans have to be paid back. And if you're at all uncertain about your revenue streams, and who is not nervous about their revenue streams at this current time, particularly if you're heavily relying upon government funding and philanthropy, it is a very scary time right now. And I say that even knowing that there has been grant funding available, particularly for the arts, from folks like Getty and CCF and others. And I hope that you are trying to take advantage of those immediate grants that are being offered. Because anytime I hear grant, I say, great, go for it. But what I would hate for you to build in is any expectation that there will be a steady state continuation of the funding, maybe that you've had in the past, when, you know, realistically, it's highly uncertain whether that's going to continue. So in uncertain times, I'm very leery of taking on additional debt when you're not very comfortable that you're going to be able to pay it back. An avenue that I like a lot more than taking on debt, for instance, would be, and you're all doing this, I'm sure, talking to every one of your best donors and your board members about the difficult situation that you're in literally right now. And donors, they do like to be needed, you know that. And they do appreciate making a difference in a crisis. Well, this is a crisis and they can make a difference. So there's never been a better time to personally ask your best donors and your board members to please step up right now, because your organization needs their help. And if you're successful in doing that, of course, that's not a loan. That's a grant, and you can use that money immediately. So I'm much more keen on going to your base and asking them to support you than I am taking out loans that have to be repaid with future revenue that may or may not be there. So it is a possibility. You can take it out. On the EIDL, there's no payments due for 12 months, but you know, that payment is going to hang over your head, and you are going to have to repay it someday. So go in with your eyes wide open on any of these programs, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about them. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. I do have a few questions here. There are a few, and if anyone, I'm going to start off with Deidre. Actually, let's see, there's a lot. Okay, Lauren Dutch. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. The CCC has cut back significantly on funding for the arts section. Anyone know what's going on there? Does anyone have any questions about that? CCF?
I can just share that, you know, the philanthropy is really struggling as well with how to respond to this explosion of need. And we've seen a lot of organizations telling us that need went up 400%. And philanthropy tried to respond to basic needs. I think one of the, so I can't speak for CCF, but I can tell you that there have been a lot of foundation leaders and board members meeting in the last couple of weeks to try and think about, now what, right? Where do we go from here? And to be fair, no one has the answer. Everyone's struggling with what to do with what seems to be a really long climb back. So, but I think, Paul, one of the questions that's coming up is for organizations that are largely volunteer or independent contractors, how are they able to participate in these sort of government sort of PPP or EIDL loan issues? Are there any? It's so employee based.
They can, yes, it's a great point. You can, but they make it very difficult. I'll be very honest with you. It's almost like the legislation that was passed was primarily driven by Republicans who were focused on business. And then there were little appendages that were slapped on by the Democrats to focus on things like independent contractors. And when you actually read the legislation, it almost reads that way. So in the setup and the requirements and how you go through the process, it works really well for a decent sized small business, but it doesn't work well at all for a nonprofit that has few or no employees and doesn't have a strong banking relationship and has strong expected future revenues. The system just isn't set up very well for them. So you can get it, but you have to jump through a lot of hoops, and the money tends to be relatively small because with that PPP, it's 2 months of salaries is what you're eligible for in the forgivable loan. So let's say you're paying yourself through, scraping together, various ways, $50,000. Your maximum loan is 2 months of that. So you're about $8,000. So there's, for the amount of work you have to go through, you have to really want that money to jump through those hoops.
The other thing I'm glad you mentioned is donors. One of the things that's been really surprising to me anyway in May, how many organizations were telling us that they were doing, they were sort of recalibrating their annual fundraiser and doing fine. That, the nice thing is the expense is lower. We're not paying for catering and flowers and tickets and parking and all of that. Not good for the job market, but in terms of really reminding your donors what you're trying to accomplish and that all of those dollars are going to programs. That seems to be working right now. And, it's a slippery slope because I don't expect it to be too sustainable, but we've seen some really good results over the last 6 weeks or so. So for those of you that are thinking I need money now and I want to only spend time on things that might work, something to consider.
I love that. And I love the personal touch. I hope you're all reaching out to your donors really one by one. It's a great time to be on a Zoom call or a phone call. And donors love to make a difference. They love to be thanked and they love to make a difference. And you can thank them and you can show that they're critical to your organization right now. And true donors, they don't want to see your organization fail and they don't want to see it really suffer. So it is a real time to be asking them for their critical support.
And just to add what Paul said is don't assume that they don't have money. Don't assume that they're not going to give. We have a tendency to go, well, they're in trouble, not do it. Don't assume until you've asked them and checked with them and let them be the one to say that and make that personal decision themselves.
So I know, Paul, that we're going to lose you in a minute, and we will keep an eye on the chat, and if there's some themes that have emerged that we haven't addressed, we'll get back to you on that. Definitely, AB5 has impacted everyone.
Yep.
The folks in Sacramento are taking a look at exclusions for that. Danielle, I wasn't sure if there was anything that you wanted to say about what the Getty program is doing and who is going to benefit from that. There are some questions about how do we know where to go to find money quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the challenge. The Getty is supporting visual arts organizations. I think they supported 22 organizations. Some of them are on this call. Congratulations. I think it then begs the question of what about the rest? Small, intimate theaters who do, really got the double whammy with AB5. And I will say that we've had countless conversations with the musicians union as well as with Equity. And, they have been, leading the charge on this without realizing the dire impact it is having on our non-commercial focused public benefit organizations, which is you. So it's a very, very frustrating, I would say this, moment where labor is not understanding the nuances of the creative sector of Los Angeles. And I think that this does make me think around, you know, really looking at this as part of workforce and economic development, and more so workforce, because when we talk about arts and creativity, we're really talking about human development, right? And I think that that's the piece that, you know, if we have such a massive creative economy, we need to really, you know, think about what we're cultivating for our city. And that is as much of, you know, the economic framing, but I think it's also very much about the human development focus. So I would really want to kind of lean into that. The Californians for the Arts and Julie Baker is doing just extraordinary work at the state level. And she's also coordinating with all the kind of local regionals to try to make sure that if you're a nonprofit arts organization, you can be exempt from 85 and be part of that carve out. I was told that there was going to be some cleanup language in the, you know, in this year's legislation. But I think COVID may have derailed that. I haven't gotten an update. So maybe that's a good topic for the next conversation we have.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle. Paul, I know we're going to lose you. I wanted to say thank you very much for making the time and trying to help us untangle this. And then Carolyn, I wasn't sure if there was any kind of last thoughts that you have about, given that some of the chat is about, you know, accessing money quickly, it sounds like the technical support that's available is available, that they should be taking advantage of some of those resources that your team has throughout the city. I think we have to unmute you.
I would say I would highly recommend reaching out for the technical assistance, because there are private sector dollars as well, Verizon, Facebook, and others that have put together, excuse me, grants for small businesses and nonprofits. And just knowing when those are opening up is a full-time job. So I would actually highly recommend kind of reaching out to the technical assistance, and actually we should send out the connectory and information from the SBDC. I do think they're staying on top of it, but I would highly recommend going to the technical assistance.
And I want to echo that, and that's really one of the galvanizing moments that I would say, if I could leave you all with the, you know, the two things to do, maybe three things to do, is number one, reach out, get your technical assistance, get in the CDFI and the Business Source Center loop. Make sure that you are at least eligible. Let's make sure that those CDFIs understand that the art sector is doing important neighborhood-based work that we need to keep afloat. You're too important to lose. Make sure you reach out to Arts for LA, join the effort to make sure that any redirection of funding and to maintain existing funding is absolutely critical. And I would also then, go and make those calls with your council offices. There's a conversation about what organizations based outside the city of Los Angeles, such as Pasadena, Santa Monica, et cetera. You know, we have a diverse local arts agency puzzle. Pasadena will need to hear from you and your electeds in Pasadena. Every city is getting CARES Act money. Santa Monica has its own local with Shannon Doubt. Rochelle is over in Pasadena. And then we also want to make sure that you can reach out to your colleagues in Long Beach. So that's really, really essential.
Thank you for those reminders. So Leslie, I think we're going to say goodbye to Carolyn and Paul and Danielle and open it up to the group to do some peer connections. Thank you guys. We've covered a lot in a short time. We'll keep an eye on the chat. I think the takeaway from the chat is we need to communicate a lot of resources, the where to go, and we will do that in the follow-up.
Thank you so much. Thank you for leading this. You all are extraordinary. You are what makes Los Angeles so incredibly special and important. And as a young person who grew up on public housing and in public assistance, if I didn't have access to the arts, I, like Carolyn, would not be with you today. So I am fighting with you, alongside you, and for you. I love you all, and I love what you do. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. And please, everybody, don't leave. Still, we've got an opportunity to talk. Paul, any last words? Except you're on mute.
That was beautifully stated. I couldn't agree more. The irony is the arts make life special and unique, and LA is a great example of that. But in these times, it's also a necessity. So it needs to be treated as a necessity and not as something above and beyond the base level of our needs. We need the arts, and it's a difficult time, but please hang in there, and we need you. So thank you.
Right. Thank you all. Who is just to, before we're gonna go into some breakout rooms, and so you can talk to each other. We also want to note that we have a schedule of summer classes this summer that do include advocacy. They do include telling your story better. They do include some fundraising things. So I ask you to all look at them. Generally, I would say everybody, the scholarship money from LADCA, and I'm still assuming that we'll be able to figure all of that out, but we want you to at least take advantage of those classes during the summer. So we're going to have Shmesa break you up into groups. We want you to just kind of do a little debriefing with each other and reflection of each other, and please come back also with questions, but an opportunity to share what you heard today, what you saw, where you see you're going, an opportunity to cross, to talk to each other. Okay. Well, anyways, I'm sure you had some. We can still stay on for a little while if people would like. We know people got a lot of things going on, and I'm sure, as we saw in some of the discussions, as much questions came up as answers. And part of it is probably this is a moving target. What we know today is going to be different tomorrow, and by next week it's going to even be different. And it's very hard for all of us to live in this state of unknown and realizing, even as artists and creative and not having to be as linear, it's still a part of, wait a second, we don't know where next month is. And somebody even asked about next year. And for us, most people, it's like, that's really mind-boggling, because we're just kind of taking it one step it's one step at a time, and information as it changes, we're dealing with. So we will be having other dialogues going on. And I know between DCA and us, we can try to answer your questions, and please feel free to contact us or them and see where we can help you, or where we can lead you, or as much as we know is coming down. Regina, any questions, or do we want to have a little more dialogue? If anybody has any questions they want to ask, we can see if we can answer them.
I guess we know
I think there was a lot of question regarding independent contractors, and we kind of haven't talked about that. Like a lot of time, we don't have any employee. We only, pay artists and musicians on a 1099. So, but now with AB5 and stuff, it's kind of just started beginning of the year. So we all a bit at a loss how to actually handle that. So.
I can tell you that it's a very hot topic in Sacramento right now. All of the government relief is really focused on employees, and for organizations that are still kind of reliant on contractors, the only ones that are doing all right are the ones that are converting them to employees. It's tough, and what we also know is that we've asked for exemptions for arts organizations, and there's a big debate about, at the very core of this, they're trying to make sure that we don't take advantage of people as employers. And we know that our entrepreneurial economy in California depends on contractors and flexibility. So it's a tough one. Right now, you're not in a good position. I get that. Christy, you had asked the question about loan rent forgiveness. And I would encourage everyone to talk to their landlords. I've seen from some of my colleagues some surprising generosity and flexibility and even forgiveness. So, this is the time to ask. It doesn't mean you'll always get what you want, but if you don't ask, you're for sure not going to get what you want. I've been surprised in some very high rent districts, examples of colleagues of mine telling me that their landlords want to work with you. So I would suggest that. So Leslie and Shmeza, I'm imagining we're over time, but if people need to drop off, and if people have time to stay and talk, we have a few more minutes to do that. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Other questions or other insights that came from your discussion groups?
I have one question, please, which is, I know that having survived the 08-09 recession, one of the huge questions that many of the foundations in particular asked of us as nonprofits was proof of sustainability. We survived 08-09, and then funders wanted to know, how long are you going to be around after the recession? And how are you guiding or sharing out advice to people about how to even position themselves for that?
Well, it's that I always hate the question from philanthropy about your vision for the future, because no one from the smartest economists on the planet are sure what's coming next. But there's a couple things. Joe Smoke and I have talked about this a lot. There's one thing that we see with arts organizations that's one of my wishes for you, which is really think hard about the difference that you're making. We tend to do a really good job of talking about outputs, but not so much about results in community. And what you heard from Carolyn was talk about the changes that you're making, the jobs that you're driving. Right now, and you guys asked the question about what philanthropy is doing. They're making, these are all Sophie's choice moments, right? They want to support a lot of things, but right now they have hungry people that are, they're trying to keep people off the streets, keeping people in their homes or apartments. All the labor statistics that Carolyn shared about the most vulnerable are usually hospitality workers, and those are areas where rents are also most vulnerable. So for philanthropy, it's been they would never say they have it as hard as us, but I really am glad I don't have to make the choices they have to make. So for all of us that have to make the case, there's a couple things they care about right now. They care about if you're partnering or going it alone, right? They're looking for economies of scale, and they're looking for results. So any time where that it kept kids out of trouble, or getting through high school, or gang or prison reform kind of efforts that allowed people to heal and stay out of trouble. Anything where you've got data that says we're working with a collection of people to make sure that there's kind of this continuity of care theme that looks like we're all being really smart, that every dollar is going to get as much out of it as we can. That's the environment that we're in. And, all the data says that, we're going to wish for the recession. This is worse, and it's deeper, and it's hit everybody. So that means that the nice part is what's also emerging, and you guys mentioned this earlier, a lot of things that you never thought would work are working. Being able to have, virtual concerts and dance thons or whatever it is. I've been just hearing about all these great events that are bringing people together, and things that we probably wouldn't have tried if we didn't have to try it. This is the time to try it. So I think the nice part is you guys are a creative community and filled with ideas. That doesn't help you pay your bills. I get that. We're really worried that this year is the beginning of a couple of really hard years. But to Danielle's point, I think don't forget that our voice also matters, and that even if you don't have the perfect message, call your city council office and let them know that this is the population you're trying to serve in their district, and that you can't do that without their support. I think it's going to be important right now, really important in the next couple days.
Awesome. Thank you, Regina. And we have 2 questions on deck. We have Michaela first and then Laura afterwards. And Michaela, your hand is raised. So whenever you're ready, you can unmute yourself.
Hi there. My name is Michaela and I work at LA Stage Alliance. A big discussion today was talking about how we could potentially move the LAPD budget towards the arts sector. But I guess I'm also curious of accountability in that as well, because we as an arts sector have also been called out for upholding systemic racism and white supremacy. And while the LA County Arts Commission requires an equity statement and an equity plan with applying for funding, I'm really curious about how that has affected funding strategies, and also how are we holding some of these arts organizations accountable? I'm mostly speaking for theater, which has been rightfully called out for taking advantage of artists of color. And so I'm also, yes, I of course want more arts funding, but how do we make sure that it is also getting into the pockets of artists of color? So that's my question for the group and the world.
I'm curious if people have thoughts. We know that one of the issues that you're bringing up is accountable, and it's a big topic right now. And my experience in the arts community has been that it's a story that you guys might take for granted a bit, that now we have to be much more intentional about. I'd be curious if any of you are thinking about it through the equity lens in a way that's different and timely to share with people. Christine sounds like she's got an idea.
Sure. I mean, I work for the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts, and we're a 7-year-old organization, but our current artistic director has been with us for 5 years and brought with him equity as one of his goals for the organization. We do have an LA County Arts Commission grant, so we did have to create a DEI formal board adopted policy for that. But I think that the thing is, you can't just have a really well-written, impressive policy and not act on it. And I think that funders are becoming more aware, and funders are savvy, and which is, fortunately, wonderfully. And I think that, it's just something a lot of us in my organization have been working out. If we say that these are our core values, we need to act on their core values. The productions have to support that. We have education programs, they have to support that, and the staff has to support that. And, so I don't know if that's really an answer or helpful, but I think that being true in it and being authentic and actually making it happen. And I think I've worked in arts funding in Los Angeles for 20 years, and I've seen organizations have something in writing that looked really good, but they didn't do anything. Their work didn't reflect it. And I think it's time that work reflects it.
Christine, were there strategies that you think were authentic that you would want people to know about that really did sort of that sort of home run that you're talking about beyond words, but actions?
Well, I mean, I think that we're still working on it a lot and have a lot of we need to grow and we need to improve. But I'd say two things that have worked. We do have a diversity committee of the staff, and we meet in small groups separately and have discussions, and it's ongoing. Until recently, we had like somebody on our staff happens to also be a skilled moderator, like she just had that training. Unfortunately, she's in a department that has currently been furloughed because of the lack of live programming. She's in production, but that was helpful, and especially the small groups, to create a safe environment. And then number two, just something that I've been talking a lot, I'm in development, but I've been talking to like several other departments, is I think one thing I find with our organization is like our public face doesn't always reflect our work. And I noticed like on our website that if you went to our website, I don't think that the pictures you would see in particular and like the things that are featured would necessarily be a full, you know, I don't think you would see what's really happening at the organization, and specifically in regards to DEI work. And I think that, you know, your organization needs to, like what you put on your website is very important these days. That's the public face that you have to somebody who's not actually coming into your venue and seeing it. So, you know, if that's true to your organization and that's part of your core, not just to do that through your programming, but also in everything you put out in the world.
I do. Hi, I'm Yu Kyung-Wen. I'm a board member on Arroyo Arts Collective. So we're based in Highland Park, and we had this conversation about, because we have to revise like our statement of inclusivity, you know, for our grant submission. And of course, our board, like most, you know, our organization board is predominantly white. And actually, our president was like adamant to bring this up and to address the topic of how we can like better address this and actually do things that promote equity instead of just like talking about how, you know, we can be more inclusive, which everybody can talk. So what we started doing is just some ideas. And this has come from a few members of people of color on our board, such as myself, is that we started a sponsorship program. So basically when everyone subscribe to a membership of our organization, is also sponsor the membership to an artist of color or any artists who are in need. So basically it's like, you know, you pay for your membership, you also sponsoring an artist of color. So that's one thing we started. And I also really advocating for all of our programs to be paid, like even an honorary stipend, because like if I know, like when I was, you know, like working, like I cannot like concentrate on making art, even consider doing art, if I don't get anything back, because, well, I gotta pay rent, like I gotta buy food. There's a lot of other things that, and also I think there's a confidence, you know, issue. Like if you're constantly being told that, oh, okay, your work is valuable, but we somehow didn't factor that into our budget and we're still asking you, you know, to work for free, like that does not sit right with me. So that is the one thing that I really push for in budgeting, you know, in any program, that there's always allocated fund to like pay all the contributors and everyone involved, just so, you know, like, yeah, like you are part of our planning budget, you know, money talks. So talk as much as you want, but unless you can write that check, you know, doesn't mean much. So.
Awesome. That was super good, you. I have two people on deck. We have Laura and then Eugene to keep going. So Laura, you had your hand up as well?
Thank you, Smeza. I had, well, just to the equity conversation, it really does within my organization, and especially I know right now as we all do our fiscal budgets, it comes down to budget and the staff and the choices that you're making, especially right now. Exactly. Like, especially right now with our budgets being really limited and fundraising being difficult, you like have the responsibility. Anyone that has any role in the budget process for your organization has a responsibility to advocate for an equal distribution of resources for the staff that we're working with, for the artists that we're working with, whether they're W-2 or 1099, like advocate for more resources for our staff of color, like at all levels, especially the junior staff that a lot of the senior staff leans on for how to respond to these, since there are less senior staff of color, I would imagine. I love, Eugene, I'd love to hear from you. I see you kind of responding and raising your hand. But yeah, it comes down to like redistribute, like me as the executive director and having been able to fundraise, I would love to like take a raise this year. I'm not. I'm going to put that to my junior staff and being really transparent with all of my staff about the budget and how the budget is determined and who makes what and how we fundraise. Like, it's also about transparency at all levels of the budget process with your staff so that they understand, because as others have alluded to, like, it's often the staffs are staffs of color that are the lowest paid in our organizations and are doing so much of this work, and they do this work every day, whether you realize it or not. Like, they're having to advocate for themselves, for the artists of color that we claim that we all support in this whole community. So I would just say, make those choices in your budget process and support those junior staff that are on the team that are doing this work, and often without getting paid or recognized for it. And wait, and then my other question too, just based on this call, is it sounds like, Danielle and her background is advocacy, and we have a very short window of time in the next week or so where collectively as a sector, the more we advocate for, again, budget, thinking of the city's budget, the more that we collectively can advocate for redistribution of funds at the city level, less so the county. I'm not as familiar with the county's budgeting process, but get involved, ask questions about the city budget. Like, everybody understand what those city budget, what it looks like, how they're redistributing funds. That's what everyone is kind of alluding to and asking Danielle, is that the city is sitting on over $1 billion or something for the police budget. The mayor said 250, now she's saying 150. Even if they don't, okay, obviously they're probably not going to defund the police in the next week, but they could reallocate more of that money from the LAPD to arts and culture. And so we as a sector need to work with LA Stage Alliance and support LA Stage Alliance. We as a sector need to work with and support Arts for LA to do this advocacy work. And my other question then too, as Danielle mentioned, reaching out to your city council members, finding out who the deputies are. There's not a consistent arts deputy at all of the city council offices. There are a number of deputies that work with arts and culture organizations in their city council districts. If you're not familiar with those deputies, definitely look on their websites and reach out and get curious. And just in the next week or so, like, reach out to your city council members. And if you don't already have relationships with them, get to know who they are, get to know who on the city council members' staffs are advocating for arts and culture. And this is a great time to develop relationships with them. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. We appreciate the reiteration. So that was really good for us to kind of summarize that. Good notes. Next is Eugene, please. If you want to unmute yourself and please talk.
Thank you. A lot of great stuff, Laura. Some of which was in my what I was going to say, but also one of the things I think that is key in terms of understanding that systemic racism does exist in our field, and to admit that to ourselves, despite how progressive and liberal we are, we have to have that frank conversation. And it's been an ongoing problem, and that one way to, I'm thinking about addressing that is just the level of transparency we can have with our organizations. Who is on our board? Who is on our senior staff? What is their composition? Let's have that frank data out there, and also bring that to our funders and say, what can you do to help us invest in people of color? Create that specific funding mechanism and tie our metrics of how we're doing as a field to that funding. That's what's going to get us further along, in my view. Also, our budget priorities. It's not enough to make slots. We have a slot for this population and then only reaching out when we have something that we think they like. No, it's about a holistic view towards our programming, towards our work, still staying true to our missions, but then put it out there transparently. This is where we are this year. It may look ugly the first year or the second year or even 5 years, but let's see that measure through time. Look at the Ford Foundation. They have their metrics up there of who is on their board, who's on their senior staff. It's not pretty. In fact, it looks like they've, even despite the amazing leadership of their CEO, it's actually going in the wrong direction in some areas. They are having that, they're putting it out there so everyone can see that, and we as arts organizations, we can do that too now. So that's all I had to say. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Eugene. And that's, if anyone else has any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Regina and Leslie. We are almost at time, but I want to give a few more minutes if anyone else has anything.
The only thing that I was going to recommend is, thanks, Eugene, for bringing up the idea that, you know, we work with organizations trying to make change every day, and change takes time. But the first step is to have a problem in mind that you're trying to solve, and then go after it over time. And all of your ideas, I hope, inspire people to try some of this out. I feel that you're all saying also that it's time for some messaging. That's what we heard from Danielle, that there needs to be action very quickly. The council offices need to hear from you. So we do have the capacity to attach a lot of links. I don't know, Michaela, if you have a good list of the arts deputies that are, I don't know if an email link is a way to go. I'm trying to make it easy for people. So
I actually don't work at Arts for LA. I just work with them. I just have a personal good relationship with them and through my work with LA Stage Alliance, but I'm happy to help. Like, I'm happy to help get those things organized and get all of us connected with them.
Okay, that'd be super. Is it, you know, Shmiz is going to do a really good job of trying to take all the links and all the ideas that you sent, and we can forward that back out to you. And then we'll try to make it easy for folks to communicate with their electeds. And then, you know, as Leslie's going to remind you, at CNM, we have a lot of programs this summer to help you think about, you know, how to operationalize some of the equity conversations that are going on that work for your organization and your mission and your community, you know. And I feel strongly it's a chance that we shouldn't make anybody bad, that we should just give everybody some grace right now, because everybody's pretty stressed out. But that we know for sure that nonprofit voices matter in this conversation. So really glad to see that you guys are up for that right now. And Christine, we get to meet that little guy, a future artist. So Leslie, I don't know if you want to close it out, but I just thank you everybody for being so committed to this. I'm really glad you stuck around.
Thank you all. Keep track. We will be hoping to do other ongoing conversations like this because we want to be there for you. Thank you all for your input. Thank you. And thank you again, as some say, for the great work you do every day in making our city the city that it is, making the communities they are, and helping people through these very hard times heal and deal with what's going on. And it wasn't for the arts community, LA would not be LA. And that's why we're all here making all this happen. And we appreciate all your hard work and good work and creativity. Thank you all, and have a good rest of the day, weekend, and good summer.
Hi, everyone. Just before the last few minutes, I just want to say I will be sending out information. Give me some time today. I do have back sessions. I will be seeing a few there in just in like an hour or so. So we'll be sending out those either later today or tomorrow, but as soon as possible. Just to let you know, we do have some arts classes by the end that are supposed to be for this summer before the end of the fiscal. We're trying to get them in after the end of the fiscal year, but they should be out if you're interested. They touch upon a lot of advocacy. They touch upon a lot of different subjects that you all are asking for, and then a lot of just self-healing, a lot of classes that we are trying to introduce that are newer and just for the summer that are an affordable rate. So please look at our website for those. Also, we just reach out for any resources that we can help you. We help do boards, fundraising, strategic plans, anything non-profity, we do help. And if you have any questions, please, Leslie's a great resource. We have office hours, we can do all that stuff. So just want to give you back some time so you can go on with your day. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your grace, and thank you everyone for being here. And I really appreciate it. I'm excited.
Smeza, can I ask a quick question? Do you have any currently about independent contractors and this issue of converting, like to access a lot of these funds, we need W-2 employees. Do you guys have anything on deck for the next week or so as we all figure out our budgets for how to appropriately transfer people that are independent contractors to W-2s, or how to navigate that?
We don't have anything on board, but let's us check with, we will check our resources and see what we can come up with to give help with it. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And she'll add to that, okay? Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Congratulations. Great job, you guys.
Thank you.
Signing off.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Yeah, good job. Thank you for your help.
Thank you, Dan and Channing. Thank you so much. I
Enjoy
like your
that light
background.
behind you. It looks good.
I'm jealous.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Okay. Stay on, Leslie, so we can talk about the next thing while I have you before I go just pass out.
I've got a meeting at noon.
Oh, you have a meeting. Okay, good. So I'm gonna stop recording it. Did you?